eyes in the back of your head for what your
That's right.
business might be doing. And I'd imagine you also would have to constantly be looking for new product to introduce then, because that attrition of business must have been.
Exactly.
So do you have any examples of well, I guess you had mentioned them with Sogo Sosha Trading Company.
Sogo Shosha is a category of trading company, meaning general trading. And the Sogo Shosha are the big ones, like Mitsubishi, Mitsui, Sumitomo, and there were a dozen of them. And there were, they all had American bases, they all had European bases, they were worldwide trading companies.
These were your competitors and sometimes your clients? So the very nature.
They weren't.
Not the end user.
Only rare circumstances, and I don't recall any, where a big trading company was our client, our customer. However, Mitsubishi Trading Company, in its group, also had Mitsubishi Electric, Mitsubishi Motors, Mitsubishi Mining, etc., etc. So there were a number of Mitsubishi companies, or Mitsui companies, or Sumitomo companies, the manufacturing companies that were our clients, our customers. The trading companies, there are a couple of instances where we were able to sell something to them, but I don't remember. And a couple times when we had exclusive agencies from an American manufacturer, one or another of our people could go to the trading company and negotiate on a particular deal where we felt we were being deprived of our right. And sometimes we would negotiate. But that again was rare, because they had the power to buy any place, any time. And so do their affiliated manufacturing companies.
Yeah, so they probably had an advantage in that sense.
Absolutely.
Where, since they're part of the same organization,
Yeah.
they could actually even take a loss in the short term to be able to get the exclusive contract to.
They could pull out all the stops on the commercial organ. However, you have to keep it clear in mind that the so-called Zaibatsu companies, like Mitsubishi, were broken up after the war ended, so that they gradually resumed their relationships. But it was not that they were one company. They were separate companies. They would compete among themselves, but the old relationships, personal, product, so on, were still there. And they all used, say, the Mitsubishi group. Not all of them used the Mitsubishi name, but they might use a name that would suggest Mitsubishi. Instead of 3 diamonds, is it? They might have some other name that in Japanese would suggest Mitsubishi. And I mean, I used to know what these were, but I forget now. But anyway, they were still considered by businessmen and general public as groups, but they were no longer formal Zaibatsu the way they had been before. I think Zaibatsu, I think that's the name.
Zaibatsu, pre-World War II, were the large corporations that were somehow, what is it now? There was only a handful of them, right? And they were somehow connected to the super wealthy. It was kind of like the equivalent of the Morgans or the Carnegies or the...
Yeah, well, they had financial services as well as manufacturing and trading. A Zaibatsu would encompass shipbuilding and trading and everything.
Mhm.
And the Zaibatsu would compete to each other, against each other.
Now, did their roots go back to the feudal system or something?
Well, yeah, basically, but it doesn't mean that the founders were always nobles or upper class.
They were...
I mean, they became nobles I suppose, over the years, but they were certainly elite.
And family-owned companies originally.
Well, I don't know about that either. I mean, it's not so much a matter of who owned the shares of, say, Mitsubishi Corporation as how much Mitsubishi owned of other manufacturing companies and so on. And it was so very extensive. But then after the war, new ones came along. A man who had, I think, repaired motorcycles was Mr. Honda. And so he started from rather humble origins and built up a big automotive company. Same way with with National, which was
Panasonic too? Is that part of National?
Panasonic and National, all part of the, what's his name? Anyway, the man who started that was, had his own little shop someplace and gradually built up the business.
Matsushita? Is that it? Matsushita? Or that was another one? Something like that.
Yeah.
Now, you found in your collection of correspondences okay.
Hello? 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 Wrong number.
Now, you found in your records, not your records, your files, I guess it would be, a letter from Sony company in its early days saying they weren't interested in transistors that you wanted to supply to them. Is that right?
Yeah, we imported some of the first transistor samples to Japan from not National Semiconductor, but from anyway, a semiconductor company. And I took them to Nippon Electric, and which was a former, Nippon Electric was formerly part of the Sumitomo Group, I believe. Anyway, it was a big independent electric company, electric products company. And they said they were not interested. And I said, well, look what's going to happen with television. They said, oh, well, in Japan, we have these, the newspaper publishers very often have corner buildings in the city, and on the corner they have moving signs with all the news. So crowds will gather around, not crowds always, but some big news, they would stand around outside that building and watch the moving news. And said the most we could expect out of television would be to put television in place of these moving signs so they'd see pictures or online photographs of what was going on. So we could expect to sell them to newspapers to use for public displays. And he said, that's not a very big market. They never imagined the mass market for television. Well, eventually they did get into television, and they did make television sets, but at that time we were too early. So we didn't sell any transistors.
That would have been in the very early 50s, maybe. Well, Dad, you not only witnessed the economic boom of the miraculous growth of Japanese economy, industry after World War II, but you were part of that in supplying the necessary parts of that of what happened there.
Well, yes, you can you can say that. Along with everybody else doing business in Japan at that time. We got some technical licenses, which helped advance the technology of Japan. We had the international reputations and marketing abilities of certain large, not large, but prominent American companies in their field, and brought that in Japan. So there was there was a part of it, but it wasn't a major part. That's what I need. I don't know if this is stiff enough to go into the toaster. Probably not.
Was that an exciting time?
Oh yeah,
as far as
very exciting. Well, it got to be sort of routine.
I mean, it would probably be equivalent, or maybe actually it was even more dramatic than what's happening in China now, or had happened in China, because the place was actually a lot of rubble, wasn't it, when you first got there?
There were, I mean, the area between Yokohama and Tokyo was literally rubble. The only structures standing were the concrete platforms on which cast iron or heavy metal safes, personal or small shops safes were, and of course the metal was charred, and but there was no building standing around it, so you'd drive between Yokohama and Tokyo, and you'd see these silhouettes of safes.
Like photographed onto the concrete pads where they used to stand.
Yeah, I mean, the safes were inside little shops or factories, and they were usually on concrete floor, whereas the rest of the floor might be wood or even dirt, depending on the type of factory. But the office always had a safe, probably cast iron and steel, and so that the structure of the safe would survive, and the pad it was on. So if you look from a distance, it's like little buildings here and there.
Which were the safes.
But there were no buildings.
Billy, this is something It's called In Defense of Childhood. And it doesn't, I think, just apply to children. There's a wonderful chapter on the importance of solitude. But anyway, it's written by a young friend of mine. And he and his wife, who was the daughter of one of my oldest friends, founded a preschool in Albany. And it's had tremendous success. Anyway, I just thought you might like to glance at it.
Oh, well, thank you.
I like this young man very much, and I think he's just imaginative and original, and
So the writer's you're somebody you know.
oh yeah, I know him well. I know him very well. I've known him since he was about maybe 14.
Well, thank you. I'll take a look.
Anyway, I
Yes.
mean, I didn't want you to belabor with it, but you might just glance at it because it's interesting.
Yes.
You know, he's had all kinds of good education. Now he's gone off and just done something original that's taken hold. So I think my little doggie is lost.
What, toaster's not working there?
No, it's, that was too soft and too thick. Shouldn't have tried to toast it.
So Dad, with your, you were describing the bombed out landscape of Tokyo, Yokohama. It was, I imagine it was pretty widespread there. You were saying how the landscape consisted of what looked like miniature buildings of safes or safe type structures on top of concrete pads, because the rest of the wooden structure of houses, little factories, and even large factories were burnt out. Now, in what was, I want to kind of ask you two questions about it. One was how it felt to have been, part of that, what would I call it, the other side, the coming from being part of being American, and they were actually, after all, the American bombers that had caused that. I mean, for good reason, but nonetheless, so one question is how it felt to, and what feelings and reception you had from that side of it. What was going on inside of you? And the other question is just your memories of that rebuilding. I'll rephrase that rebuilding one maybe after you finish the first one. Basically how it felt for you with to be part of, I guess what you were now part of the rebuilding process, but
Well, the first time I went between an airport and Tokyo was between Atsugi, then you go through Yokohama, Kawasaki, and that's where I saw this landscape that I described of safes. And of course there were the large factories, which were just steel frameworks, sometimes twisted. But my own feelings, as I recall now, they weren't particularly emotional or dramatic. And I suppose that's because I wasn't part of the bombing of Tokyo, and in fact I wasn't in combat during the war, so I had no personal encounters with raging Japanese soldiers. I had long accepted the overall idea that we were at war with Japan. I was prepared and trained to go out on a carrier and be part of it, but the war ended when it did, and I didn't go. So my visit to Japan was as a civilian, not as a military. I had an overall acceptance of the war situation, so I felt no particular emotion.
Atsugi is where you
That's where
arrived.
General MacArthur landed.
This was
And for a while, that's where the military planes landed in. I was a civilian, but with the government, so that's where I landed. The dramatic thing for me was from there I went to Manchuria. And in Manchuria I met your mother, and she had been out of contact with her family. For all she knew, her home was bombed out with the rest of Tokyo, and her family were probably no longer alive. But